When the embers of Blackwood Manor finally cooled in the autumn of 1998, fire marshals sifted through the wreckage not for a body, but for the ghost of a sound. They found what was left of the Finch Ontological Archive, over 2,000 magnetic tape spools, melted into grotesque, black sculptures of silence. But the most terrifying discovery came from the warden's own scorched journal, which stated that of the 89 unique anomalies he had successfully contained over 5 decades, only one remained accounted for. The others were now free. This channel isn't for everyone, only for those brave enough to face the darkest corners of American history. If you're ready to hear stories that others dare not tell, stories that will make you question what really happened in the shadows of our past, then subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. And I'm curious, from which state are you listening to this story? Leave a comment below telling us your location. Our story begins not with the fire, but decades earlier on the down east coast of Maine. In the isolated, fog-choked town of Millbridge. This is a place where secrets are easily kept, swallowed by the dense pines and the ceaseless whisper of the Atlantic. It was here, in the years following the Second World War, that a man of immense and secretive wealth, Alistair Finch, constructed Blackwood Manor. To the outside world, Finch was an eccentric academic, a recluse dedicated to a noble cause. He told the town, the historical societies, and the few academics he corresponded with that he was creating the Finch Ontological Archive. Its stated purpose was the preservation of America's vanishing sonic history, the oral traditions of forgotten tribes, the haunting melodies of Appalachian folk songs, the last verbal testimonies of Civil War veterans. He was seen as a philanthropist, a guardian of memory. But this was a lie, a meticulous, brilliantly constructed lie that served as the foundation for a prison. Blackwood Manor wasn't a library, it was a containment facility. And Alistair Finch wasn't a collector, he was the warden. Finch's private journals, rescued from the 1998 fire, reveal a truth far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. He wasn't recording history, he was hunting and capturing things. Things he described not as ghosts or spirits, but as ontological anomalies, conceptual contagions, ideas with teeth, realities that were wrong, and which sought to bleed into our own. He believed these anomalies were drawn to places of strong human emotion or historical resonance, manifesting as specific, localized phenomena, a sound, a pattern, a feeling, and he had devised a way to trap them. His methods were a profane fusion of cutting-edge acoustic engineering and what his journals only refer to as esoteric resonance principles. Finch would identify a potential target, what he called a conceptual breach, and then deploy his custom-built equipment. These were not simple recording devices. They were acoustic traps designed to lure the anomaly, resonate with its specific frequency, and then pull it, screaming, from the fabric of reality and imprison it in the magnetic oxide of a tape spool. His first confirmed capture is detailed in an entry dated November 12, 1952. Case 001, The Crooked Rhyme. Source: a children's schoolhouse in rural Vermont, abandoned since the diphtheria outbreak of 24. The anomaly presented as a skipping rhyme that, when heard, would slowly erase the listener's ability to perceive right angles. Victims were found walking in spirals, unable to navigate doorways, their minds unraveling into curved chaos. Deployed the cardioid resonance field at dusk, the sound it made as it was pulled onto the spool was like tearing linen. The air in the schoolhouse felt straight again. Containment is successful. Specimen catalogued and stored in Vault A. For nearly 50 years, Alistair Finch operated in total secrecy. He was a silent, self-appointed guardian, a man who justified his horrific work with a chillingly simple ideology: ontological quarantine. He believed he was protecting humanity from madness, from realities that would shatter our minds. He was the sole arbiter of what was real and what must be imprisoned. He built a fortress for his prisoners. The archives were housed in a subterranean, lead-lined wing of the manor, climate-controlled, seismically isolated, and protected by a series of complex mechanical locks. Each of the 89 successful captures was given its own canister, its own shelf, its own eternity of silence. There was The Man Who Wasn't There, a recording from a Chicago bus station that contained the absence of a specific man, an absence so profound that anyone listening to the tape would forget a person they loved. There was The Color from the Static, an audio frequency from a defunct Nevada radio tower that could allegedly make listeners perceive a new, maddening color. There was The Weeping Map, a sound captured in the Louisiana bayou that could make cartography and a person's sense of direction dissolve into meaningless grief. Each tape was a nightmare in a can, a monster held in magnetic stasis, and Alistair Finch was their jailer. He had no partners, no conspirators, only employees who knew nothing, a groundskeeper who never went inside, a cook who left before nightfall. The Finch family was a family of one. The institution was one man's iron will, and for decades the system worked, the silence held, until the warden grew old. By the mid-1990s, Finch was a recluse within his own fortress, his health failing. His journal entries grew more erratic. He knew he could not maintain the archive alone forever. The prison required a warden. He needed an apprentice, an heir, someone trustworthy, meticulous, and, most importantly, someone who had no idea what they were truly signing up for. In the spring of 1997, he placed a single discreet advertisement in a university's archival sciences journal. It called for a junior archivist to assist a private collector with the cataloging and digital transfer of a significant private collection of mid-century audio recordings. The pay was exceptional, the location was remote, the work was simple. It was the perfect trap, baited for the perfect victim. And in his youthful ambition, a brilliant young graduate student named Elias Thorne took the bait. He had no idea he was applying for a job as the new jailer for a library of sleeping gods. He did not know that his work would not be preserving history, but accidentally orchestrating the most terrifying prison break in human history. He was about to become the unwitting liberator of 88 separate apocalypses. Elias Thorne arrived in Millbridge, Maine, on a Tuesday in late July 1997. He was 24 years old, the top of his class in archival science, and filled with the kind of academic ambition that sees only opportunity, never danger. To him, Blackwood Manor was not a prison. It was a golden ticket, a chance to work with a legendary collection, to make a name for himself, and to escape the rigid confines of university life. The manor itself was a Gothic monstrosity of dark granite and sharp angles, looming out of the fog like a forgotten headstone. The air was heavy with the smell of pine, salt, and something else. Something cold and sterile, like the air in a tomb. Elias, however, saw only history. He saw prestige. He stepped out of his car, a young man walking willingly into the heart of a 50-year-old conspiracy. Alistair Finch met him at the door. The man Elias saw was not the imposing figure from the old photographs, but a bird-like creature of 82 years, stooped and frail. Yet his eyes, sunken into a face of wrinkled parchment, burned with a terrifying intensity, an iron will in a failing body. "Mr. Thorne," Finch's voice was a dry rustle of leaves. "Punctuality is the cornerstone of preservation. Come." Finch led Elias not through the grand halls, but down a narrow, spiraling staircase behind a hidden door in the main library. The temperature dropped with every step. The air grew thinner, cleaner. Elias was entering the sanctum, the real archive. The vault was a cathedral of silence. Rows upon rows of sterile steel shelves stretched into the gloom, each holding dozens of identical metal canisters, 2,112 canisters to be precise. The air hummed with the faint, almost imperceptible thrum of machinery. "The Finch Ontological Archive," Finch announced, a flicker of what looked like pride or perhaps fear in his eyes. "My life's work." Elias, overwhelmed, ran a hand over a canister. The metal was unnaturally cold. He read the neatly typed label. Case 014, The Lonesome Whistle. These recordings are fragile, Finch explained, his cover story perfectly rehearsed. The magnetic oxide is degrading. Any stray electromagnetic field, any significant vibration, could erase them forever. They represent a sonic history that, once gone, can never be recovered. This Elias understood. This was the language of his trade. The betrayal of trust began here, cloaked in the noble words of preservation. Finch laid out the task. Elias was to undertake a complete digital transfer. Every single analog tape was to be converted into a high-fidelity, lossless, digital audio file. These new files would then be stored on isolated, gold-plated hard drives, ensuring their survival for centuries. He was to start, Finch instructed, with Vault A, cases 1 through 89, the core collection. The rules were bizarre, but Finch justified them with paranoia disguised as prudence. The archival terminal was custom-built, operating on its own closed power circuit, completely air-gapped from any network. No internet, no external devices, no copies. "You are not just an archivist here, Mr. Thorne," Finch warned, his grip surprisingly strong on Elias's arm. "You are a custodian. The integrity of this work is paramount. You will report any anomaly in the recordings, any distortion, any unexpected noise, directly to me. Do you understand?" Elias, eager to prove his worth, nodded. "Of course, Mr. Finch." He had no idea that the anomalies Finch was worried about weren't on the tapes. They were what the tapes were designed to prevent. His first task was Case 001, the crooked rhyme, the warden's first prize. Elias threaded the black, glossy tape onto the reel-to-reel machine. He calibrated the levels, initiated the transfer software, and put on a pair of professional-grade headphones. He pressed play. One step, two step, crooked man stone. As the rhyme looped, Elias felt a wave of intense vertigo. He blinked. For a terrifying fraction of a second, the perfectly straight edge of the computer monitor seemed to curve. The rigid line of the shelf across the room appeared to sag in the middle, as if melting. He tore the headphones off, his heart hammering in his chest. The room snapped back to normal. He shook his head. Long drive, low blood sugar. The oppressive silence of the vault playing tricks on his mind. He was a man of science, of data. He dismissed it. But in that moment, he had done exactly what Alistair Finch had brought him here to do. He had translated the anomaly. He had taken a monster imprisoned in an analog cage and given it a new digital form, a form that was more fluid, more portable, and, as Finch knew, infinitely more dangerous. Later that night, Elias mentioned the brief disorientation to Finch. The old man's eyes narrowed, but not with concern for Elias. He didn't ask about his health. He asked about the equipment. "Did the voltage regulators fluctuate?" Finch demanded. "Were there any file corruption warnings on the terminal? Any packet loss during the write to disk?" "No," Elias said, confused. "The transfer was flawless, perfect one-to-one fidelity." A strange, grim satisfaction settled on Finch's face. "Excellent," he whispered, more to himself than to Elias. "The containment holds. For now." Elias returned to the vault the next day, his brief unease forgotten, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. He had successfully archived one piece of history. Only 2,111 to go. He reached for the next canister on the shelf. The label was stark and simple, yet it sent an involuntary shiver down his spine. Elias had no way of knowing that Alistair Finch's journal described this recording as a mimetic auditor, a sound that, once heard, compelled the listener to find and correct numerical errors in the world around them, not on paper, but in reality. The journal spoke of the anomaly's original victim, an accountant from Baltimore who, after hearing it, was found dead of starvation, having spent 3 weeks trying to balance the number of leaves on a tree. Elias threaded the tape. He put on his headphones, and he pressed play, unknowingly about to digitize a force that sought to make the entire world add up. When Elias Thorne played the tape for Case India 02, the whispering accountant, he heard no music, no voice, only a cascade of numbers whispered in a dead, emotionless tone. He logged it as corrupted data, possible numeric sequence test. He felt nothing. The transfer was clean. The day was normal. The effect was not immediate. It was insidious. That evening, in his small assigned cottage on the manor grounds, he found himself staring at a bowl of blueberries. He felt a sudden, inexplicable compulsion. He tipped them out onto the table and began counting. 117. The number brought him a strange, profound sense of relief, an anxiety he didn't even know he had, now quieted. The next morning, he counted the stairs down to the vault. 36. He counted the canisters on the first shelf. 42. The act of counting, of assigning a definitive number to a set of objects, was becoming a deep, psychological need. He was being infected by the very data he was trying to preserve. The digital ghost of the whispering accountant had found a new mind to audit. The next few weeks fell into a terrifying routine. Each day, Elias would descend into the cold heart of Blackwood Manor and digitize another nightmare. Each of the 89 cases from Vault A had its own unique, violating effect. After archiving Case 007, The Grieving Shadow, he spent an entire day feeling a phantom sense of loss for a person who had never existed. He found himself weeping in the bathroom, with no idea why. After Case 016, The Unfaced Portrait, a recording of what sounded like paint drying, he became unable to recognize his own reflection for 12 hours. The face in the mirror was a stranger's, and it looked back at him with a chilling indifference. These were not tape distortions. This was not tinnitus. An archivist knows the artifacts of his trade: hiss, wow, flutter, print-through. This was something else. This was a violation. His scientific mind scrambled for an explanation. Psychoacoustics, infrasound, mass hysteria induced by isolation. He tried to rationalize the unraveling of his own perception. Finally, he confronted Finch. He described the vertigo, the phantom grief, the numerical compulsions. He presented it as a problem to be solved, a variable affecting the integrity of his work. Finch listened, his expression unmoving. He did not seem surprised. He seemed expectant. "A known phenomenon, Mr. Thorne," the old man said, his voice smooth as poison. "It is called archival sensory echo, a rare side effect of prolonged exposure to decaying magnetic media. The brain, in its attempt to process the fragmented sonic data, creates phantom sensations. It is a neurological illusion. Nothing more. Focus on your work. The feeling will pass." It was the perfect lie, a clinical, academic-sounding dismissal, a betrayal of trust delivered as a diagnosis. Finch was gaslighting him, using Elias's own scientific worldview as a weapon against him. And for a time, it worked. Elias, wanting to believe the lie, returned to his duties. The turning point came on the 54th day. He loaded Case 023. The label simply read, "The Deleted Man." Case 0223, The Deleted Man. Source: a census office in Albany, 1961. The anomaly is a conceptual void, a sound that retroactively erases a single, randomly selected social acquaintance from the listener's history and memory. The target is not killed, but their existence is neatly redacted from the listener's reality. All photographs change. All memories rewrite themselves to fill the new gap. A subtle but profoundly dangerous psychic weapon. Containment was difficult. Elias felt a cold snap in his mind, like a synapse breaking. He felt nothing else. The transfer completed. He logged it as blank tape. He finished his work for the day and went back to his cottage, feeling uneasy but unsure why. That evening he called his mother. It was a weekly ritual. As he was hanging up, he said, "Say hi to Dad and Sarah for me." There was a confused pause on the other end of the line. "Honey," his mother said gently. "Who's Sarah?" Elias froze. "What do you mean? My sister, Sarah." "Elias, you don't have a sister," his mother replied, a nervous tremor in her voice. "You never have. It's always just been you and your father. Are you feeling all right? You sound tired." The terror that seized him was absolute. It was not a feeling or a hallucination. It was a fact that contradicted his entire life. Sarah Whitman, his sister, was gone. Not just gone, but had never been. He was an only child. He had always been an only child. This was not an archival sensory echo. This was an amputation of reality. Finch's lies crumbled into dust. The entire archive, the entire project was revealed to him in that moment for what it was, a monstrous deception. These weren't just recordings. They were active. They were weapons. And Alistair Finch had known it all along. Elias wasn't a custodian. He was a guinea pig in a lab coat he didn't even know he was wearing. That night, Elias Thorne, the archivist, died, and Elias Thorne, the investigator, was born. His objective was no longer preservation. It was survival and truth. He waited until he was sure Finch was asleep. Then, breaking every rule the old man had set, he returned to the silent, cold vault. He didn't touch the tapes. He went to the terminal. If the anomalies were real, if they were some form of data, then the transfer process must have left a trace, not an audio artifact, but a digital one. He bypassed the simple user interface and accessed the system's core command line. He ran a deep diagnostic on the archival software, looking for anything out of the ordinary. And there, buried in the log files for the digital transfer protocol, he found it. For every single one of the 23 cases he had achieved so far, there was a hidden subroutine entry. It was labeled, "Ontological Signature Verified, Quarantine Integrity, 99.8%, Containment Migrated." Containment migrated. The words hung on the screen, cold and clinical. In that instant, Elias Thorne understood. He wasn't copying the tapes. He wasn't making a backup. He was performing a transfer, a prison transfer. He was moving these things from their decaying analog cells into new, incorruptible digital cages. The entire project, this grand act of historical preservation, was nothing more than the modernization of a paranormal penitentiary. The question was no longer what was happening. The question was why. The terminal had given him the raw, terrifying data, but the ideology, the justification for this 50-year crime, would not be on any hard drive. It would belong to the warden himself. Elias knew he had to find Alistair Finch's personal records, his journals. Breaking into his employer's private study was a profound violation, but the memory of his non-existent sister Sarah had burned away all professional courtesy. This was now a matter of existential survival. Finch's study was exactly as one would expect. Meticulously organized, smelling of old paper and leather, a room where every object had its place. And there, on a shelf behind the main desk, not hidden but displayed with an unnerving confidence, was a row of 19 identical, black, leather-bound ledgers. Each was embossed with a single year, from 1949 to 1997. The warden's logs. Elias pulled the most recent volume. His hands trembled as he opened it. The handwriting was the same precise clinical script from the canister labels, but the words revealed the true, chilling nature of Alistair Finch's soul. This was not the diary of a madman. It was worse. It was the meticulously recorded research of a man who believed he was sane in a world teetering on the brink of madness. Finch never used words like ghost or demon. He called his prisoners conceptual parasites. He wrote of invasive mimetics and reality bleeds. He was, in his own mind, a doctor, and our reality was his patient. The ideology had a name, a term he repeated like a prayer: ontological quarantine. Entry 7432. The layman fears the beast that can tear his flesh. He does not understand that the true predator is the idea that can tear his reality, a thought that, once thought, cannot be unthought, a sound that, once heard, rewrites the axioms of his world. These are the true contagions. My work is not cruel, it is necessary. It is the cold, hard equation of quarantine. The suffering of the few I have archived is a meaningless variable when weighed against the conceptual integrity of the species. The journal was a ledger of horrors, each entry a sterile report on a newly captured nightmare. It detailed Finch's first encounter with an anomaly, a phenomenon he called the Fold, that appeared in his childhood bedroom after his younger brother died of influenza, a corner of the room that no longer seemed to obey the laws of physics. That event had set him on his path. It was a crusade born from trauma and fortified by immense wealth and intellect. Then Elias found what he was looking for: his own name. The entry was dated 8 months ago. Entry 9811. The analog media is failing. The magnetic charges that form the bars of their cages are bleeding away. Some have degraded by as much as 12% over the last decade. A breach is becoming inevitable. A full migration to a digital containment matrix is the only solution. But the transfer requires a catalyst. A human mind processes the raw data to act as a temporary filter between the analog and digital realms. The archivist must be intelligent, meticulous, and completely ignorant. Mr. Thorne is the perfect candidate. He is not my apprentice. He was a tool. A disposable piece of equipment was brought in to handle toxic material, and Finch had every intention of discarding him when the job was done. The full, terrifying scale of the deception was now clear. Elias was not just digitizing monsters. He was priming them, moving them to a new, more stable platform, and in the process exposing his own mind to every single one. But the worst was yet to come. A few pages later, Elias found the final piece of the puzzle, a section titled Failsafe. Just when everything seems to be coming to a head in this terrifying tale of Blackwood Manor, I want to pause for a moment. If this story is giving you chills, share this video with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Hit that like button to support our content, and don't forget to subscribe to never miss stories like this. The truth about what happened next is even more shocking than what we've uncovered so far. Let's discover together how this house of horrors finally came crashing down. Should the quarantine be irrevocably breached? Should an outside agent attempt to remove or disseminate the data? Or should the custodian himself become compromised? The acoustic incineration protocol will be triggered. The primary power conduit will be rerouted to the magnetron cores embedded in the vault walls. In 1.2 seconds, the entire archive, both analog and digital, will be subjected to a focused electromagnetic pulse of such intensity that it will not simply wipe the media, but physically liquefy it. The resulting heat flash will incinerate the vault's contents, including any biological material within. A necessary, if regrettable, finality. It was a self-destruct sequence, a murder-suicide pact between Finch and his collection, and Elias was now standing in the kill zone. He carefully placed the journal back on the shelf, leaving it exactly as he had found it. His mind was racing. He had to escape. He had to get to the authorities. He had to expose Finch and this entire house of horrors. He walked out of the study, his heart a cold stone in his chest, and made his way to the manor's main entrance. As his hand touched the heavy oak door, a voice cut through the darkness from the top of the grand staircase. "Leaving so soon, Mr. Thorne?" Alistair Finch stood there, a gaunt silhouette against the upstairs window. He was not holding a weapon. He didn't need one. His eyes, even from that distance, were chips of ice. I felt ill," Elias stammered, his hand recoiling from the door. "I was going to get some fresh air." Finch descended the stairs with an unnerving, steady slowness. "You misplaced the 1997 ledger, Mr. Thorne. You returned it to the right of 1996. I keep them in perfect chronological order. An archivist should know the importance of proper sequencing." The trap had been sprung. The warden knew his prisoner had discovered the nature of his cell. The fragile illusion of trust was shattered. "The work is not yet complete," Finch said, his voice dropping to a near whisper as he reached the bottom step. He stood between Elias and the door. "There are still 66 specimens awaiting migration. You have a job to do." Before Elias could react, Finch raised a small remote-like device from his pocket and pressed a button. From deep below them, a sound echoed through the entire manor, a deep, visceral thud of heavy steel meeting steel. Finch had just sealed the vault. From the outside, with Elias's workstation and his only way of understanding the full scope of the archive still inside. "Your work environment was becoming compromised by outside distractions," Finch stated, his voice devoid of all emotion. "From now on, you will work without interruption. Report to the vault in the morning. I will let you in, and I will let you out when the migration is complete, not before." Elias Thorne was a prisoner. The elegant lie of employment had been stripped away, revealing the cold, hard bars of his cage. Alistair Finch was no longer a reclusive employer. He was a jailer in his own home, and his only inmate was the man he had hired to be a biological component. For the next 2 weeks, life became a suffocating, terrifying ritual. Each morning at precisely 8 o'clock a.m., Finch would unseal the massive vault door. He would watch as Elias descended the 36 steps into the cold, silent heart of the archive. Then, the heavy door would swing shut, the tumblers would fall, and Elias would be entombed for the next 10 hours with the library of sleeping nightmares. He had no choice but to continue the work. The fail-safe protocol was a loaded gun against his head. Any deviation, any attempt to sabotage the equipment, and Finch would press the button that would turn the vault and Elias into a plasma furnace. So he worked. He threaded the tapes. He ran the transfers. With each new transfer, he felt another piece of his sanity chip away. After archiving Case 042, the inverted object, a sound recorded in an antique shop that made the listener perceive one random object's function as its exact opposite, he stared at a fork for an hour, terrified it would somehow join food together instead of piercing it. He had to physically restrain himself from trying to untie his shoelaces. He was being systematically dismantled, mind and soul, by the very things he was tasked to contain. But amidst the terror, a new, desperate resolve was forged. Elias the archivist was gone. Elias the investigator had been replaced. Now there was only Elias the saboteur. He couldn't destroy the archive. He couldn't escape the manor. But he realized he had one weapon left: the data itself. Finch believed the digital realm was a more secure prison. Elias, a true child of the digital age, knew better. A digital prison could have a digital key. His plan was a stroke of desperate genius. It was a digital insurrection. He couldn't stop the migration, but he could alter its destination. While the archival program was running, transferring a case he identified from the journal as the looping conversation, Elias began to write his own code. A virus, a worm. He designed it to be invisible to Finch's simple diagnostic scans. The worm's sole purpose was to attach itself to the digital signature of every single anomaly he had transferred. It was programmed with a simple 2-part command. First, duplicate. It would create a single, hidden, encrypted copy of each anomaly's data file. Second, transmit. The archive was air-gapped. No internet, no network. Finch had ensured it, but Finch was 82 years old. He understood locks and lead walls, not radio frequencies. Elias, in his initial survey of the equipment, had noted that the custom-built terminal, for all its isolation, used an internal, high-frequency wireless bus to communicate between the processor and the shielded storage drives. It was a microscopic, closed-circuit network designed to prevent data degradation over cables. Elias's worm was designed to hijack that bus. He programmed it to convert the data of a single, specific anomaly into a modulated radio signal. It would then broadcast this signal in a tight, repeating burst, using the terminal's own hardware as a crude, low-power transmitter. It was a long shot. A desperate, digital message in a bottle. He just needed to choose the right message. He couldn't transmit something overtly destructive, like the crooked rhyme. He needed something subtle. Something that would seem like an error, not an attack. Something that would target the system, not a person. He frantically searched the journal he had memorized during his brief time in the study. He found the perfect messenger. Case 061, the glitch in the pattern. Source, a textile factory in South Carolina, 1972. The anomaly is a sonic resonance that introduces cascading errors into any system that relies on repeating patterns, mechanical, biological, or digital. It caused the factory's looms to produce flawed, monstrous tapestries. It caused the workers' heartbeats to become erratic. It is a virus of pure entropy, a chaos engine. This was his weapon, the glitch in the pattern. He finished his code and embedded it into the archival software. He then ran the transfer for Case 061, successfully migrating the anomaly and simultaneously weaponizing it. His worm was now active, silently attached to the digital file of the glitch, waiting. The final part of the plan was the most dangerous. He needed to trigger the broadcast, and he needed an antenna. That night, when a weary Finch let him out of the vault, Elias complained of a severe headache from the humming machinery. He asked for a glass of water. As Finch turned his back to go to the kitchen, Elias palmed a single, heavy, silver letter opener from the mail tray in the foyer. The next morning, as he walked to the vault, he tripped, dropping the letter opener. It clattered across the stone floor, landing just inside the vault's doorway. "Clumsy me," he muttered. Finch, impatient, gestured for him to leave it. "Get your work done. You can retrieve your trinkets later." He sealed the vault, leaving the silver letter opener inside. Elias had his antenna. He typed the final command into the terminal. "Execute Worm Broadcast 61. He hit enter. On the screen, nothing happened. The normal archival interface remained, but deep within the machine, a war had begun. The digital file for the glitch in the pattern was being converted into a radio signal and pulsed outwards, amplified by a stolen piece of silverware. He had no idea if it would even escape the lead-lined walls of the vault. It was a prayer whispered into the void. For 2 days, nothing happened. Elias worked, his hope dwindling with every passing hour. He had migrated 88 of the 89 core specimens. Only one remained. A canister labeled simply, Case 089, the silence that listens. He was on the brink of completing his task, of becoming a fully expended component. On the 3rd day, as he was preparing to archive the final anomaly, it happened. The lights in the vault flickered. The climate control systems began to stutter, the fans spinning up and down in chaotic rhythms. The digital clock on the terminal displayed gibberish. The glitch was loose. It had escaped the vault as a radio signal and was now infecting the manor's own electronic and electrical systems. It was a cancer in the house's wiring. From outside the vault, Elias could hear a sudden, frantic crashing sound, then an alarm, a shrill, piercing fire alarm. Alistair Finch, sitting in his study, would have seen his own systems turning against him. The power grid for the manor, run by a complex system of regulators, would have been fluctuating wildly. The security monitors would have been displaying static. His perfectly ordered world was descending into chaos, and in his paranoia, he would assume the worst, that an anomaly had breached containment, that his life's work was failing. That's when he would go for the failsafe. Elias heard it through the thick vault door. A new sound. A deep, powerful hum, building in intensity. The acoustic incineration protocol. Finch had panicked. The glitch had worked too well. He was about to be cooked alive. Inside the vault, the air itself began to vibrate. The steel shelves trembled. The metal canisters rattled, their silent prisoners singing a chorus of impending doom. Elias Thorne was trapped at ground zero of an electromagnetic apocalypse of Finch's own design. The acoustic incineration protocol was charging. He had 90 seconds until the magnetron cores fired and turned the entire vault into a microwave oven. His desperate gambit had backfired. He had unleashed the glitch in the pattern to create a distraction, but he had underestimated the depths of Alistair Finch's paranoia. To the Warden, any loss of control, any chaos was synonymous with a catastrophic breach. He had hit the panic button, but the glitch was not a targeted weapon. It was pure entropy, a virus of chaos. And as it infected the Manor's power grid, it did not spare the fail-safe system itself. As power surged towards the magnetron cores in the vault, the glitch was busy rewriting the ripples of the electrical flow. The system designed to channel 1,000,000 volts of energy into a single focused blast began to stutter. Conduits overloaded. Safety regulators, now infected with chaotic logic, failed to trip. The power Finch intended for his archive was instead feeding back into the very walls of the house. Outside the vault, Alistair Finch would have watched his last resort turn on him. The lights would have exploded. The control panel for the fail-safe would have sparked and died. Then came the fire. Not a clean incineration, but a dirty electrical fire, erupting from deep within the Manor's ancient wiring. The fail-safe had failed. The glitch, the agent of chaos he had released, had saved his life by sheer random chance. He was alive, but he was still entombed. And now Blackwood Manor was burning down around him. He was sealed in a lead-lined, fireproof tomb. He could do nothing but wait. Wait for the fire to consume the house, for the mechanisms of the vault door to warp and seize, or for the air to run out. But he had forgotten about the last prisoner, Case 089, the silence that listens. He had not yet migrated it. The canister sat on his workstation, untouched. As the smell of smoke began to snake its way through the vault's ventilation, a new, far more terrifying sound began. Silence. Not the absence of noise. It was the same, profound, active silence he'd heard on the tape for The Deleted Man, a silence that consumed sound. The distant crackle of the fire began to fade. The hum of the backup life support systems grew quiet. Even the sound of his own heartbeat in his ears seemed to be getting softer, more distant. Case 089, the silence that listens. My final capture, the most dangerous of them all. It is not a sound, but a void, a sentient absence. It is drawn to moments of extreme duress, and it does not destroy. It observes, and it learns, and what it learns it becomes. I fear I did not truly contain it. I only gave it a place to wait. The anomaly was waking up. Drawn by the fire, by Elias's terror, by the chaos of the failing systems, it was leaking from its analog can. The silence in the vault was no longer passive. It felt attentive. It felt like he was being watched, not by eyes, but by the very absence of sound itself. Just when everything seems to be coming to a head in this terrifying tale of Blackwood Manor, I want to pause for a moment. If this story is giving you chills, share this video with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Hit that like button to support our content, and don't forget to subscribe to never miss stories like this. The truth about what happened next is even more shocking than what we've uncovered so far. Let's discover together how this house of horrors finally came crashing down. Hours passed. The air grew thin and hot. Elias, huddled by the vault door, was beginning to succumb to asphyxiation, his mind reeling from the oppressive, listening silence. And then a new sound, a grinding metallic screech, the fire department, responding to the blaze that was now consuming the entire manor, had found the strange, circular vault door in the basement. Believing someone might be trapped inside, they were using the jaws of life to pry it open. They found him unconscious on the floor, suffering from severe smoke inhalation, but miraculously alive. They dragged him out into the night, away from the burning ruin of Blackwood Manor. Of Alistair Finch, they found only a few charred bone fragments in the remains of his study, near a melted lump of metal that had been the fail-safe control panel. The warden had been consumed by his own final protocol. Elias Thorne was the sole survivor, the only witness. In the aftermath, he tried to tell them. He told the fire marshals, the police, the psychologists. He told them about the archive, about the ontological anomalies, about the tape that erased his sister from existence. He showed them the strange, melted spools of tape, the 2,000 ruined recordings. They saw a brilliant young man who had suffered a profound psychotic break due to stress, isolation, and trauma. They heard the ramblings of a victim trying to make sense of a horrific accident. The official report was simple. An eccentric collector, Alistair Finch, died in an electrical fire of his own making, and his young assistant, Elias Thorne, was lucky to escape. The story of the conceptual parasites was a tragic coping mechanism. The case was closed. The institution of Blackwood Manor was buried under ashes and official reports. The truth was concealed not by a conspiracy, but by its own sheer insanity. No one would ever believe him, but Elias knew the truth, and he knew one other terrifying fact. On the night of the fire, as he lay on the floor of the vault, succumbing to the smoke, he had done one last thing. Driven by an instinct he didn't understand, he reached out, put the canister for case 089 onto the machine, and hit play. He had not run the transfer. He had simply listened. He had exposed himself in his final moments of consciousness to the silence that listens. He was the last person to hear it, and as he recovered, he began to notice something. In moments of quiet, he could feel it. A pocket of profound silence near him. Attentive, watching, learning. He had not escaped the vault unscathed. He had become the new container. He was the final, living recording. The other 87 anomalies he digitized, their hard drives, shielded in gold, were found by the fire marshals. They were warped by the heat, but some data recovery experts believed the information could be salvaged. They were labeled as evidence and taken to a secure government facility for analysis, their true nature utterly unknown. 87 digital nightmares, waiting on a shelf, mistaken for folk songs and historical speeches, waiting for someone to press play. Elias Thorne is the only guardian left. He lives a life of careful, controlled noise, always with a television on, always with music playing, terrified of what might happen if the silence gets too deep. He is the last remnant of the Finch ontological archive, a man haunted not by a ghost, but by an absence, a living prison for the last and most dangerous anomaly. The one survivor who must now ensure that the silence never ever finishes what it started, listening. For 7 years, the story of Blackwood Manor was officially over. A footnote in the history of Down East Maine, dismissed as a tragic fire that claimed the life of a wealthy eccentric and shattered the mind of his young assistant. The 87 gold-plated hard drives recovered from the ashes were logged as evidence in a closed case, filed under Finch Alistair, accidental death. They sat in a climate-controlled government archive, gathering dust, digital ghosts sleeping in a forgotten tomb, but the most dangerous secrets rarely stay buried forever. In 2005, the drives were transferred, not to a museum, but to a place far from the public eye, a place known only by its designation, the North American Data Analysis and Reconciliation Center, or NADARC. Buried 3 stories beneath the benign landscape of a Utah desert, NADARC is a cathedral of data, a place where the government sends its most sensitive and corrupted digital information to be painstakingly resurrected. And the task of resurrecting the Finch collection fell to one person. Dr. Eris Holloway was the head of Adark's damaged media division. She was a woman of pure logic, a master of data recovery who believed every problem had a rational, technological solution. To her, the Finch drives were a curiosity, a complex puzzle. The fire had warped their casings and caused significant platter damage. Her superiors wanted to know if anything from the so-called priceless audio collection could be salvaged for the National Archives. Dr. Holloway and her team of 12 analysts began the painstaking work. For months, they meticulously reconstructed the damaged drive heads and resequenced fragmented code. Finally, in October of 2006, they had a breakthrough. They successfully restored the first complete file. It corresponded to the label on one of the melted canisters from the evidence photos. Case 007, The Grieving Shadow. They bypassed the audio component, focusing on the raw data structure. It appeared to be a simple, uncompressed audio file. To ensure its integrity, Dr. Holloway isolated the file in a secure network sandbox and ran a full diagnostic. The program played the file. The data was clean. No viruses, no malware. But later that day, a strange mood settled over the Level 4 containment lab. Analyst Mark Cheney suddenly broke down, weeping over his keyboard. When asked what was wrong, he said he just had a profound, overwhelming feeling that he had missed his own daughter's wedding, a daughter he did not have. 2 hours later, Dr. Holloway found herself staring at a schematic, overcome with a deep, crushing grief for a lost mentor whose name she couldn't recall. For 24 hours, the entire team was gripped by a phantom sorrow for people who had never existed. Dr. Holloway, ever the scientist, logged the incident as a shared stress response, a psychological side effect of the high-pressure, isolated environment. She dismissed the data and moved to the next recoverable file. It was Case 002, The Whispering Accountant. Again, the file seemed benign, a nonsensical string of numbers. But 2 days later, the lab's automated inventory system began to fail. It started reporting impossible figures, claiming there were 4,118 chairs in a room that held only 12. The server temperature logs began showing decimals to 200 places. The system wasn't malfunctioning. It was auditing. It was trying to balance its own data with a logic that was not its own. Simultaneously, Dr. Holloway noticed her analysts exhibiting obsessive-compulsive behaviors. Mark Cheney was arranging paper clips into perfect, geometrically spaced rows. Another analyst was manually counting lines of code in a program that contained millions of them. The entire lab, a sanctuary of order, was becoming infected with a numerical obsession. This was no longer a shared stress response. This was a pattern, a contagion. Eris Holloway did something no one had done in 7 years. She read the full, unredacted testimony of Elias Thorne. She read about his non-existent sister Sarah. She read his frantic, dismissed claims about recordings that could alter reality. She cross-referenced his descriptions with the case numbers. Case 023, The Deleted Man. The Sister. Case 007, The Grieving Shadow. The Phantom Grief. Case 002, The Whispering Accountant. The Numerical Compulsion. The data points aligned with a terrifying precision. Elias Thorne was not delusional. He was the primary source. He was telling the truth. Dr. Holloway immediately escalated her findings. She bypassed her direct superiors and sent a priority report to the director of Adark himself, a man known only as Director Shaw. She detailed her findings, her theory of active data or conceptual pathogens, and recommended an immediate and total cessation of the project. She advised that the remaining 85 files be treated as a biodigital threat of the highest order. She recommended they be destroyed. Director Shaw listened to her frantic report without interruption. He looked at her data, at the cross-referenced testimony of the madman Elias Thorne. He showed no surprise, no alarm. When she was finished, he simply nodded. "Your analysis is exemplary, Doctor," he said, his voice calm and even. You have confirmed what we have long suspected." Holloway was stunned. "Suspected? You knew about this?" "We have files," Shaw said, turning from the window. "Old OSS files from the 40s. Whispers of a man named Finch buying up strange assets, reports of concept-based phenomena. We believed it was wartime folklore, until now. You haven't just recovered a historical archive, Doctor. You have uncovered the holy grail of asymmetrical warfare." The horror of his words washed over her. She recommended destruction. He saw an arsenal. "Destroy them." Shaw gave a thin, cold smile. "Doctor, you have handed this nation a weapon that makes the atomic bomb look like a firecracker. A weapon that doesn't destroy cities but realities. An audio file that can make an enemy general forget his own battle plans. A digital file that can erase a key scientist from the memory of his entire research team. A signal that can make their stock market balance itself into oblivion." The betrayal of trust was absolute. The very institution designed to analyze and contain threats was now planning to cultivate and weaponize them. The cycle was beginning again. Alistair Finch's paranoid private crusade of ontological quarantine was about to become official U.S. policy. Only the name would change. Now it would be called conceptual dominance. "Your recommendation is denied, Doctor," Shaw said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Your new directive is to proceed with the restoration of all 87 specimens, with extreme caution. I want a full threat analysis of each one. I want to know what it does, how it works, and how we can point it." Director Shaw said, "Welcome to the new arms race, Doctor." Dr. Eris Holloway stood in the sterile, silent office of Director Shaw, and for the first time in her life, she understood true, absolute fear. It wasn't the fear of the unknown. It was the fear of what was known, what was coveted, by men with unimaginable power. Alistair Finch had been a monster, but he was a monster trying to keep other monsters in a cage. Now the zookeepers were handing out the keys. The betrayal was complete. The institution she had dedicated her life to, the pursuit of knowledge and order, was being perverted into a factory for reality-breaking weapons. Her role had been twisted from a rescuer of data into a polisher of warheads. She was given a new clearance. Onyx level. She was made the head of a new compartmentalized project codenamed Liturgy. The name was Shaw's idea. He had a flair for the dramatic. Her new lab was even deeper underground, shielded not just from electronic signals, but from reality itself, with materials and geometries she didn't recognize. Her team was dismissed, their memories of the anomalies wiped clean by men in quiet suits, using methods she was not permitted to know. She was alone again, just her and the 87 digital demons on their golden platters. For 3 years she worked. Under the watchful, digital eye of Shaw and his silent overseers, she dissected the nightmares. She had no choice. She catalogued the effects of the irrational key, a sound that made the listener incapable of understanding the purpose of any lock, turning the world into a series of impassable barriers. She analyzed the involuntary prayer, a mimetic virus that forced entire populations in test simulations to cease all productive activity and begin speaking a language that had never existed. She was mapping out the apocalypse, and with every file she unlocked, she saw Finch's twisted genius and Shaw's terrifying ambition. Finch had hunted them to protect the world. Shaw was taming them to conquer it. It was the ultimate moral inversion, the justification of absolute evil cloaked in the language of national security. But Eris Holloway was a scientist, and a scientist's greatest tool is observation. She noticed something Shaw's team, in their arrogance, had missed. A subtle degradation in the files themselves, a digital entropy that went beyond normal data decay. The anomalies were unstable. Removing them from their original analog containment and housing them in the sterile logic of a digital matrix was having an unforeseen effect. They were adapting, but also breaking down. Like a virus mutating too quickly, they were becoming unpredictable. The crooked rhyme no longer just bent straight lines. In one simulation, it made the very concept of two cease to exist for 3 hours. The anomalies were becoming more powerful, but also more chaotic. They were slipping their chains. This was her chance, her final, desperate gambit. She couldn't destroy the files. She couldn't refuse to work, but she could introduce a catalyst. She could accelerate the decay. She began her own project in secret. She needed an anomaly that could corrupt other anomalies, a digital Judas. She found it in the files recovered from the ashes of Elias Thorne's terminal. His worm, the program that had released the glitch in the pattern. Working in stolen seconds, she re-engineered Elias's code. She designed it not to broadcast, but to infect. Her new virus was engineered to seek out the unique ontological signature of every anomaly in the liturgy archive and introduce a single, catastrophic flaw. It would delete the off switch. It would turn a temporary, contained effect into a permanent, cascading one. It would make the weapons unusable by making them uncontrollable. It was a suicide pill for the entire arsenal. Her moment came during a high-level systems diagnostic, the one time a month when the entire network was briefly connected for maintenance. She had 30 seconds. She uploaded her virus, disguised as a routine software patch. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Every anomaly in the archive went active and rogue simultaneously. The digital containment matrix shattered. 87 reality-bending parasites were unleashed at once into a closed underground network. The glitch in the pattern sent the facility's power grid into self-destructive convulsions. The whispering accountant corrupted every byte of data in the servers, turning the entire history of Project Liturgy into meaningless, numerical gibberish. From the security feeds, a sound leaked out, the static that hungers, and began to erase the facility's own digital blueprints. The building was literally eating itself from the inside out. Director Shaw, watching from his command center, saw his entire arsenal turn on him. He gave one final order. Purge the facility. Full thermobaric detonation. Now. Dr. Eris Holloway never made it out. She was consumed by the very chaos she had unleashed, a willing sacrifice to undo the evil she'd been forced to be a part of. The Nadark facility, the deepest, most secret installation in the country, was incinerated from within. The official story was a catastrophic failure of a prototype geothermal reactor. 1,400 personnel were listed as killed in the accident. The truth was buried under 10,000 tons of fused rock and glass. But Eris Holloway had made one last move. Before she unleashed her virus, she had downloaded one thing: a single encrypted file containing all her research, Finch's journals, Elias's original testimony, and the full, horrifying truth of Project Liturgy. She had mailed it, on a simple thumb drive, to the only other person on Earth who would understand. Elias Thorne, now a man in his late 40s, received the package. He lives a quiet life, forever containing the silence that listens. He opened the file, and for the first time in over 20 years, the full scope of what began in Blackwood Manor was made clear to him. He was not the lone survivor of a madman's folly. He was the first domino in a secret history of the world. The 87 anomalies are gone, destroyed in the fire of their own corrupted logic. The Finch Ontological Archive is no more. Project Liturgy is a ghost, but the knowledge remains. What do you think of this story? Do you believe that powerful institutions today would be capable of concealing such truths for the sake of power? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this investigation compelling and want to hear more stories about America's hidden criminal history, subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and share this video with someone who appreciates the importance of uncovering buried truths. Until next time, remember that the most important stories are often the ones that powerful people hoped would never be told.